Now, you had a unique challenge, both of you, in Raya and the Last Dragon, because you needed to create 5 different unique looks for each of the 5 tribes. This just sounds incredibly daunting to me. And each one is different. Each one feels, they feel real in a way. They feel authentic in a way, even though they're clearly like, fantasy. But you bring a lot of authenticity to these worlds. And I'd love to talk to you about kind of your approach to creating all of these. We've got fang, heart, spine, talon, and tail. There's so much going on there. So talk to me first about kind of your reaction when you knew this was what you were going to do. Is this a fun, exciting challenge for you? Or is it like, oh man, how are we going to do this? And then talk to me about the way you got it done. Rob, we'll start with you.
It was definitely a challenge in the beginning, to think, we've done movies before with multiple lands, and that just opens things up. When we first started planning our cinematography, we were actually talking about very specifically shooting and lighting based on the lands, but we found that trying to stick with that too much was too much of a departure from the story, and we kind of planned our cinematography more about the through line of Raya's journey with trust. So we realized that the environment wasn't that able to key on, but at the same time, it's all about
that snoring is hilarious, by the way. I have to interrupt you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is it really that bad?
I can hear it. I think it's really funny, but okay. I want to make sure the audience understands what it is. So you're just going to hear a snoring dog. It's fine. Just get over it. You've all heard it. You've all been home for a year. You know what a snoring dog sounds like. But I don't think we need to disturb the dog at all. Who doesn't want to relax on a nice day like this? So fine.
There was one thing we could do as far as how we were shooting, because of the story, like in Tail. Well, actually, the lighting is a little more geared towards that. I'll just stick with camera for a moment. Like for Fang, anything we did in Fang, we kind of wanted to shoot that everything with a centered composition. We tend to not shoot things very centered. We tend to keep things more closer to thirds. And for Namari and her world, we kind of wanted the set to be symmetrical and her world to be symmetrical. Our production designer for environments, Helen Chen, was really pushing for that. Like somewhere in this movie, I would love to do something centered. So we chose Fang as that because it was its own thing. They're the enemy, if you will, of the film. So we kind of set them a little bit apart with how we shot them. But lighting wise, I think that's where you really see the difference amongst the environments.
I'm just hearing
me too. It's so funny.
It's great. It doesn't.
Now I think he's easing into his REM sleep, and we're really starting to hear it now. Yeah, Adolph, talk to me about your standpoint of this, because, like I said, you're creating 5 worlds. They need to be different. They need to be authentic. They need to follow the story and support the story. It's a big challenge. How are you doing that with lighting?
Yeah, it's interesting. Rob had mentioned we've worked on a handful of projects together, and one thing that in our process that we've developed over projects is actually not getting too connected to the lands, because what happens inevitably in the story process is the emotional arc or thematic that ends up happening in a particular location can change. And that really flips things, at least as far as lighting and how you shoot it as well. So our approach was really looking we were thinking about the lands, but then we were really thinking about, we had 2 story thematics, which was trust and distrust. And what we did is we start talking about what cinematography attributes do we want to go with that. So for example, with trust, it was a much more soft lighting, much more long lenses, shallower depth of field. Really, we'd worked with the set designer to place things that would get bright hits of light or light sources to get really nice bokeh effects. So the production designer, like Rob had mentioned, we were working really closely with to try to do this, but we were really looking at story thematics. And then once we really understood where those were going to land in each land, we tried to incorporate what was going in along in that land to kind of support the story thematic. So for example, water is tied to trust and everybody coming together
Yeah.
Once that happens, the drones take over, the water goes away. So like Tales was all about the distrust story thematic. And so things start working out like that. So it was very dry and arid. And then, we had already knew we were going to shoot that story thematic, very with high contrast. We have virtual film stocks. We wanted to use a really contrasty film stock and LUT on that particular thing. And Rob, you could talk about the lens choices for our distrust story thematic.
Yeah, we in that same way we have our trust and distrust, so we kind of want to create a contrast. We have one style that's a certain way, and then we kind of pick the opposite to contrast those. So, like Adolph was saying, in trust we have long lenses, which give us that compressed feel, pull a lot of that bokeh. Higher cameras, more eye level with our characters, and then when we flip that for the distrust, we want that sort of that wide lens, which makes things a little more uncomfortable. It opens up everything, and everything gets into sharp focus almost painfully. And we can do that either from one sequence. We think of it more sequence to sequence as opposed to land to land. But Adolph's point, the opening of the film is in Tale, which is all about distrust because it's Raya trying to get her start in the film. And we're starting where we pick her up after all this horrible stuff has happened. But even in a certain scene, we'll actually go from shot to shot, back and forth between a long lens and a wide lens, depending on what character we're looking at. If we're looking at Sisu, who is the epitome of trust, we shoot her on a very long lens. We get sparkling water behind her. When we flip the camera, we shoot Raya. We're on a wide lens. Everything's behind her is in focus, not very attractive. And the wide lens kind of makes it unattractive too. And we're actually trying to get the audience to feel that contrast between these very two different themes that are battling in the film.
An example of that in the film is the midpoint of the story, where Ryan and Sisu are having a conversation. So if you watch that, there's these really sharp, spiny spikes behind Raya, and behind Sisu, we've placed water that sparkles when it's shot with a really shallow lens.
Yeah, and you feel that too as a viewer. Like you definitely, when something is comforting and trusting, and when something feels wrong and like, there's bad vibes in there. There's trouble looming. You can really feel that. Exactly. You can really feel that. Did you have any visual references for these lands? Were you looking at films, photographs? What was inspiring you as you were developing these lands?
Yeah, we definitely were looking at a lot of other films. A lot of ones that were shot more naturalistic. So like Remnant or something like that. But then also films like Indiana Jones were really inspiring. They really captured the feel of, how we wanted to light this movie, where it felt motivated, but at the same time it was stylized and really added to the adventure. And it's worth saying, I don't know if we've said it before, but, we had a really talented production designer, Paul Felix, who was exploring the color script and painting that for production, to really have something to kind of visually see what this is going to look like. There's a much quicker way to explore overall ideas with the directors with little thumbnail paintings. So he was doing that. He's super talented.
Rob, any references for you as you were doing your layout? What was inspiring you?
We were talking about like that sort of balanced or symmetric compositions, movies like Hero, just have that sort of reverence feel to the characters and a lot of close-up work. Some anime, like for action, anime movies like Kill Bill, just that have a lot of movement and dolly work for the fights, a little more lyrical in their way they capture the fights as opposed to just brute force, but then also just handheld madness like the Alien movies, just that kind of camera chasing somebody down a hallway where you lose them a little bit. So yeah, those are kind of all over the place.